We've established, as John did in the opening, and as we have in the panel since, that circularity is very much a team sport, that we can't do what we need to do without working with one another, with the collaboration, partnerships, and all that. Or put another way, there is no I in circularity. Oh, wait. I'm being told that's not correct, but anyway, you get the point. So we're going to talk about that now, and this great panel with starting from my right, left, Bridget Croak from Closed Loop Partners, Amanda News from Target, and our returning champion Michael Kobori from Starbucks, formerly Levi's. You're wearing the brand. You're wearing both brands somehow. It managed to do that. That's quite nice. And what's I think interesting, starting with you, Michael, is that there are so many things that we can't get rid of in the reduced part of this, and notably things that are part of brands, like in Starbucks' case, cups, or in the retail space, bags, that we need to bring into the circularity realm. And so how do we do that? How does that happen? What does it take? And so we're going to talk about the collaborative nature of this. And Michael, let's start with you. I mean, Starbucks has been working on the sustainable cup for well over a decade in various ways. First of all, give us a little update. Where are we in that journey? Uh-oh.
This is what you're talking about, right?
Oh, you tell us.
The single-use disposable cup. Every year, all of us in the world collectively use how many of these, you think? Not Starbucks cups, just disposable single-use cups.
It starts with a B, but I don't know the number.
500 billion. 500 billion of these are mainly going into the landfill, right? And so we are a fraction of that, but it's our responsibility to eliminate and reduce. And we're going to talk about like some of the collaborations we've had, particularly with Bridget and her organization, about how we do that. At this point, I came to Starbucks 2 years ago when we set out our vision to become Planet Positive. And one of my, let's call it a holy grail, literally, pun intended, you like puns. So you got it, right? Holy grail, right? Holy grail, we got to get rid of this, okay? And we got to get rid of this right now. We're looking at all the different ways, from when you go into a cafe, the for here ware, right? You get your coffee in the mug. So we're bringing that back. COVID, we suspended it. We're bringing that back. Personal cups, COVID, we had to suspend it for health reasons. We're bringing those back. Now we have safe handling procedures. And the other thing we're going to talk about, which is a borrow a cup system, which is going to deal with the big impediment to all of this, which is that friction that this kind of thing creates between us, our baristas, and the customer, the more time it takes and all of that. So that friction is something we got to address. Right now, 20 pilots are going on around the world. Korea, Singapore, Tokyo, London, Oahu, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Ohio. We're testing different versions of how we deal with the cup and different levels of incentives and penalties, all the way up to $1 in Oahu to penalties of 50 cents.
Well, that's sort of the what. We'll get into some of the how. One of the things I think you're going to discover is I mean, you may call it incestuous, but it's actually collaborative, where Starbucks has invested in Closed Loop Partners. They've done a cup challenge. Starbucks has stores in Target. Target is partnering with Starbucks in a number of ways. Target has invested in a fund, a venture fund that Starbucks has, and so this is, you've got a little microcosm here of what it takes to do this. And so, well, let's go to you, because you've been a catalyst here, Bridget, at Closed Loop Partners. What is the theory of change that you see, that you bring to this, that allows big players who are not directly competitive in their sectors to find solutions together?
Well, a couple things. One is, I would say, not directly competitive in this case, but directly competitive in many of the things that we do. So Next Gen Consortium, that's all around cups and solving for that. Our theory of change is we need to solve for the whole system. There's no single thing that's going to solve this. And frankly, it's not just about the fiber cup. I mean, Michael has all the cups there. And I think 3 years ago when we launched that initiative, which is a collaboration with Starbucks, McDonald's, and several others in the same industry, and Starbucks and McDonald's came together first, which are obviously direct competitors in many ways. And so if you can bring together, even though both of those companies are some of the biggest brands in the world, not one of them buys enough cups to change the whole system on their own. And so you really need to get the competitors, especially the big ones who are most out front on this, to come together, which creates the market signal that drives innovation, that allows a lot of the suppliers to come to the table and be like, oh, wait, no, I have a few things I could dust off. There's incentive to change. And if everything's fine, then we don't need to change anything. So the theory of change is both bring together competitors, create the market signal, and then have interventions across the whole system on a number of different types of solutions at the same time. Single-use fiber. How do we make sure that will get through the recycling system, which has grown? Polypropylene cold cups. Early stage, many players, I think we just heard from the Recycling Partnership, which is working on this as well. So many of us are working on that. We're looking at it collectively through the cups. And then reuse and refill, that's made tremendous progress and a lot more to come on that. So working across all of those from innovation, testing and scaling, or testing and piloting, and de-risking collectively, and then making sure everything can get through the supply chain. And then the final thing is that we have a whole investment arm of our business where we can start to scale a lot of this.
If I could, can I just say, Bridget, like you mentioned, the two big benefits of this collaboration, the Next Gen Cup Challenge, the one you mentioned was we sent a signal to the industry, right? The biggest brand sent a signal to our suppliers. We want a more sustainable cup. That was key. But the other thing that came out of the almost 500 entries into that competition was a new way of thinking about it, right? Because actually, the best cup is no cup, right? The reusable cup system that some of the entries gave us changed our thinking. And that is now what we're really pursuing is, right, how do we get a reusable cup system?
Well, let's pivot from cups to bags, because that's been one part of your pain point, and particularly, the people are trying to get rid of bags, and we all have these cloth bags that there's not enough of us. What's been the challenge that you've had in trying to figure out what's the goal? Is the goal to have recyclable or no bags or reusable? What's the goal with Target?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Joel. It's great to be here. And I do have to take a moment and thank GreenBiz for finding a chair that matches the suit I bought at Target. So thank you.
You don't know the last minute scramble that took place on our team to do that, but thank you for noticing.
Nice job.
Very high maintenance.
You did it. Well, a couple of things. We launched our new sustainability strategy last June, and it's called Target Forward. And it was built for collaboration. It was built to co-create, and it's to co-create an equitable and regenerative future with our guests, our partners, and communities. And I say that because we were inspired by the Starbucks and closed loop and how they were, removing straws and making a cup more sustainable. And Michael's right. We learned that this isn't about finding a better bag. Many times at Target, when we talk about sustainability, we make a point to say affordability and sustainability are not mutually exclusive. And when we think about the bag, like reimagining how to move products, we many times say ease and sustainability cannot be mutually exclusive. Like we need to find that intersection of joy and ease, convenience, and sustainability. So that will require us to build better habits together. And so, when we've been testing some of the challenge winners across Target, Walmart, and CVS, we're learning a lot, and it's informing the next stage, which is what I think Michael was saying. You go in with an idea, but your best plan is to not go in with a strong hypothesis. It's to actually go in and learn, listen, and continue to iterate.
Yeah. Well, this stuff, we talk about collaboration, like let's collaborate. It's not easy stuff. This is hard to do. So I want to get into some of those challenges, and starting with you, Amanda, and then Michael and Bridget, of what did you learn along the way that would help others in following your footsteps much more quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, well, one of the things when we were developing Target Forward with the leadership team, our C-suite, we spent time identifying and prioritizing the most meaningful topics. And then we spent time talking about what do we control and what is outside our brand, and how do we learn about the barriers and the challenges in the system outside of Target. Because the reality is we can do a lot when it's in our control, but many of the issues require systems change. And so I guess a couple of things I would say is, number one, know your brand, know what you're good at, know what your capabilities are, and where you could create change. Number two, get to know the system and where the barriers and challenges are and what you're willing to bring to the system to really kind of create and instigate change. And then the last thing, I can't say this enough, it's the measurement. Like, we're really good at building a roadmap, KPIs, OKRs, all of those great things, and I love those, as somebody who's run a P&L in the past. But the fact is, this work requires patience, and it requires a different way of measuring. And I do think that measurement of learning and iterating is going to be the unlock.
Yeah. How about the choosing collaborators and picking partners in here? Michael, have you found that there's any particular secret sauce in doing that?
I think, Joel, in terms of choosing your collaborators, the things that I've learned over the years, I sound ancient, don't I? The folks who can, like you were saying, Amanda, influence the industry, right? That's one. But the real important thing is everybody's got to have the shared objective, right? If you have folks who have different objectives, it's not going to work in terms of that collaboration. And I would say the third thing is probably, in the end, all of the most successful collaborations that I've been a part of have great leadership. They bring together and hold together by their mission and their force of will that diverse, sometimes hard to corral coalition, and they keep it going. That leadership is really important.
Are you talking about CEO level or C-suite or CSO level?
It can come from different places in the collaboration, right? I think in Bridget's case, it can come from the convener, right? Closed Loop has great leadership to keep us together and drive us forward. In other collaborations I've been, that are multi-stakeholder with brands and NGOs and suppliers, it can be the brands, right? The individual participants, representatives from the brands. It depends, right? But you've got to have someone or some folks who are really committed and driving that partnership forward.
Yeah.
And can I add something? Because one of the things I love about what Bridget and the Closed Loop team did is this was not about compliance. With the single-use plastic bag, the regulatory landscape is evolving, and you could look at it through a compliance lens, but there was a commitment to say, how do you look at it at a lens of, from a lens of opportunity? And when I think about the design mindset of how it can transform products, when I think about collaboration and how it can transform, systems, I just think that has to be key. Is leadership has to see it as a real growth opportunity, not as compliance.
I think that a thing that I would add is, I think is back to an earlier point that you made. Oftentimes when you're starting these journeys, and these are complex issues that have, again, there's no single solution that's going to be a magic one, but there's always someone in a leadership position who wants the magic unicorn. And so it's up to like the champions who are guiding their organizations to help bring their companies along on the systems approach, because everybody wants a quick win. We all want a quick win, and that I have not found that exists yet. When we started kind of our first consortia around this years ago and thinking about, we brought some reuse and refill kind of ideas to the table, and it was really hard to get folks around the fact that that would be a reality and something that was a viable business model. And several years later, and certainly not, we're a small part of that puzzle of many folks who are out in this audience working on that have created the enabling conditions that allow for folks like you guys to say, like, to your executive teams, this is the way forward. It's what our customers want. It's what, policymakers are going towards. So there's lots of pieces that have to happen here. And it's the internal process of getting companies to work together to prove that then there's a competitive advantage that they can take on and a part of that, which is really important. We want everyone to see that there is a business opportunity to be had here. So the collaboration is just creating the enabling conditions such that they can go compete.
Well, let's talk about the customer piece of this, starting with you, Bridget. I'd love to hear from the two of you about how far ahead of the customer you can go with this stuff. Although in some cases, I don't know who's beating up Target about bags. I certainly know that you're under some pressure with cups. But how do you balance that in trying things and just making sure you bring them along for the journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. So couple of thoughts here. One is that this is why collaboration is important on things that you are out ahead of your customers on, because if you bring a solution to market on your own and your customers aren't there yet, there's always some of your competitor who's saying like, I'm happy to provide the alternative that's more convenient but less sustainable, for example. And that's certainly not what we're, that creates a lot of risk for you guys. So to go together to a certain point, to the point where you can compete, I think is one really critical piece of that. And I forgot the other point I had.
Well, just, how do you bring them along? Amanda?
Yeah, when we did our pilots with the winners, there were a couple of things that we had learned. Number one is the consumers loved the convenience, but they wanted to use it at other places. So I think you're onto something, Bridget, that, when you have something that's so entrenched in the system, trying to differentiate, trying to have a proprietary solution isn't actually in service of the consumer or the guest. And so I think we quickly found, I love it at Target, and even better if I can find it at other places. The second point was, you need it to be clear and easy to understand, but they wanted to be inspired. And I think we should never lose the fact that this is about joy. This is about solutions. This is about really, finding something that allows people to deliver on their own values. And so I do think, you might not get the exact solution, but if you go in and just listen and learn and co-create with the consumer on what those habits are, I think sometimes the themes and what comes out of it informs then the next step. And it's better. It's always better when you work together.
And haven't Starbucks and Target exchanged customer information or information about customer response to some of these things? I'm taking you off the direct question I asked, but I think that may be part of the answer.
Yeah, the customer insight is something that is critical to us as brands, right? They're interacting directly with a customer and the consumer. And, Bridget, you talked a little bit about that, right? There's a certain amount of brand collaboration, but in the end, right, as companies in a capitalist economy, we are set up to compete, right? So, yes, sometimes we all want to hold hands and kumbaya and, right, feel like, yes, collaboration is going to solve all of these sustainability challenges. But it isn't, because I think our real power is in that competition, right? Because that's what we're set up to do. And I think, as we go to the customer, the big challenge is how do we deliver on sustainability while delivering on everything else that the customer wants and expects from us? So the reusable cup system has to be fast and convenient. Like, our responsibility is to, like you were just saying, right, make the customer feel good about their choices. And one of our leaders who's leading the cup program said, we have to make a reusable cup the easiest, best thing that a customer can do every day.
Let's see if we can get in a quick question from Sidebar. Deanna, you got a question for the panel?
I knew you were going to come to me, but I'm fascinated with reuse systems. So I'm always curious from brand perspective, what it will take for reuse to overhaul your entire offering. I know that's a lot to ask, but how do we get there?
Yeah.
I can start. Actually, we had coffee this morning, and we were dreaming that exact same thing, right? We're going to learn a lot with the single-use plastic bag, but how does it continue to go in the aisle? And, one of the things, and it comes back to using your brand as a catalyst for change, is identifying the categories where there is interest, and then starting to, again, get some scale. Because the reality is, doing it one item at a time, you may fail, and it's not because it's not a good idea. It just isn't working without it being a bigger, part of the assortment, for example. So I do think we're being really thoughtful about how do you take this learning. We're thinking about already how we apply it to the aisle, but how do we again do it together so it's actually a meaningful
And
choice.
people are shopping, like they are not existing in a single bubble. As much as we only want them to shop with our company, they shop at multiple companies. So they're going, from your store to some competitors, and it varies based on day. They need to have the experience over and over and over, and that needs to be consistent. So they need to be trained with a better experience overall.
Well, I love the idea of collaboration, obviously, but I also love that where does competition take over and each of you trying to outdo the other. And I think that's the really interesting sweet spot where, how do we compete to create the most sustainable choice, bringing the consumer along, collaborating where appropriate. It's fascinating. We've only touched on a little bit, but we're out of time. But I really appreciate all you've done and all you've shared with the audience. Please join me in thanking Michael, Amanda, and Bridget.